So Rousseau has set a problem for himself. Is there anything philosophers can do to solve the problems intensified by the sciences and the arts? Let me be clear about the problem. In the beginning, man was good. Man was good because man was simple. He had simple pleasures that were easily satisfied and that derived from the needs of the body. Natural man did not worry about the future, as he was lost in the present, enjoying himself and his simple pleasures. Natural man was not constrained by others, by a government, or by complex desires. That would be difficult to satisfy. Natural man was simple and free. Rousseau does not here in the first discourse describe the process whereby human beings left this state of simple innocence. He would do that in the second discourse, so we will not dwell on that process now. However, Rousseau does say that inequality is the source of evil in human life. Luxury, softness, and complex desires gave rise to the arts and sciences, and the arts and sciences, in turn, caused even greater luxury, softness, and more complex desires. This is the downward spiral of civilization. And it would be difficult to put the toothpaste back in the tube. Rousseau praises the simple rustic life and the farmers who live close to the land and the simple people who identify with their country. Yet it would be impossible to uninvent the sciences and the arts. And those things threaten the rusticity and simple good-hearted patriotism of the simple people. The sciences and the arts are here to stay. This raises a question. Is there any way of reestablishing man's goodness in society? Is there any way of recapturing man's simplicity while living with others in society? Can simplicity and goodness be reconciled with the sciences and the arts? Now remember that Rousseau began the first part of the first discourse with a praise of enlightenment. Recall that he called man's rise to knowledge a grand and beautiful spectacle. He also praises the revival of the sciences in the last few generations as a marvel. Near the end of the second part, he also praises Francis Bacon, René Descartes, and Isaac Newton as the great preceptors of the human race. That can be seen in paragraph 24. Later in the same paragraph, he calls Francis Bacon perhaps the greatest of philosophers. So while many philosophers do it wrong, and we will have more to say about that shortly, it is possible for philosophers to do it right, or at least to be praised. It is possible that some philosophers, under some conditions, could help reconcile man's goodness with the sciences and the arts. And let us turn to that possibility with some systematic attention. As we said in the last video, part 2 of the first discourse begins with an extensive cataloging of the problems caused by the sciences and arts. That section culminates with a statement about how inequality is at the root of all our corruption, and a further statement about how citizens have disappeared from the modern world. Then Rousseau writes as follows at the beginning of paragraph 20. I admit, however, that the evil is not as great as it might have become. Eternal foresight, by placing salutary herbs next to certain noxious plants, has taught sovereigns who are its ministers to imitate its wisdom. It is after its example that that great monarch, whose glory will acquire only new luster from one age to another, drew from the very bosom of the sciences and the arts, sources of 1,000 disorders, those famous societies responsible for the dangerous trust of human knowledge and for the sacred trust of morals, through the attention they have given to maintaining among themselves every purity and to requiring it of all the members they admit. Rousseau's comments here can only be understood as sarcastic. He speaks of things like the Academy of Dijon, who was sponsoring this essay contest. Earlier French monarchs, Louis XIV and XV, established learned societies and supported them with royal funds. Rousseau says here that those academies were as interested in promoting knowledge as they were in promoting virtue. The academies apparently sought to make sure that those who entered were men who were living irreproachable lives and wrote only useful things. Useful, that is, for the love of virtue. Fiddlesticks. It immediately becomes clear in paragraph 22 that Rousseau has only been ironic in praising these institutions. He says they were designed to solve a problem, that there were too many farmers and not enough philosophers, or perhaps too many citizens and not enough cosmopolitans. By honoring the sciences and arts, the king had only fed the beast. The king was supporting institutions that would ruin citizenship, undermine faith, and detach people from what was still healthy. Soon thereafter, Rousseau even seems to wish that the printing press, which serves these academies, could be uninvented. These philosophers are actually worse than useless. They are pernicious. The king had shown that he did not understand the public good or politics when he established these academies. But perhaps the king or another king could be taught better if he had a better teacher. That is a delicious possibility. Rousseau imagines a time when the public itself, awake to the corruption accompanying such vain philosophy, will ask those academies to be banished from the political community. After entertaining this possibility at the end of paragraph 23, Rousseau turns to philosophers of a different stamp, philosophers who do not need the moral or royal support characteristic of these academies. Genuine philosophers do not have teachers. And here his model is Francis Bacon. Now, it is passing strange that Rousseau praises Bacon. Bacon is the philosopher of modern science and the poet of modern progress. He is the one, above all others, who cultivates a belief that the future will be better than the past. Bacon wants to make the ways of science the ethic for the political community. Bacon wants there to be thousands of academies all over modern countries dedicated to understanding the relationship between cause and effect and exploring it to human benefit. Given everything that Rousseau says about the sciences and arts and about the vanity of the royal academies, I would have expected Bacon, who embraced the sciences and royal academies, to be the real bad guy. Why does Rousseau praise him as perhaps the greatest philosopher? I offer a tentative answer. The answer to this question is that Bacon, perhaps uniquely among modern thinkers, was very active politically. Rousseau notes this particularly. Bacon understood that philosophy had to be useful, and he went about making it useful. He may not have understood properly what it means to be useful, but he had the hopes and the genius to pull off getting the ear of the English king. Let the learned of the first rank find honorable asylum in their courts. Let them there obtain the sole recompense worthy of them, that of contributing by their reputation to the happiness of the peoples, to whom they will have taught wisdom. It is only then that it will be seen what virtue, science, and authority can do, when animated by a noble emulation and working in concert for the felicity of the human race. With Bacon, philosophy and political power coincided, and the philosopher was concerned not about vain knowledge, but about the felicity of the human race. Rousseau will improve upon Bacon because he understands more deeply the character of human happiness, lying in man's simplicity, and the character of unhappiness lying in the institutions that corrupt man. Hence, Rousseau's political project will be different from Bacon's. Indeed, while Rousseau will write works where he tries to bring government and society into line with the demands of man's simplicity and its goodness, this political community will emphasize patriotism. It will probably be much smaller. It will not put private economic enterprise or commerce at the center of its life. Bacon never tried to do any of those things. Philosophy can be useful, but only if the philosopher is Rousseau. Unlike the ancient thinkers, Rousseau seems to think that the gulf between philosophy and political communities can be overcome. And the method whereby it will be overcome is the modern method. But Rousseau is the best adherent of that method. No work teaches that better than the second discourse, and students of Rousseau, prepped by these videos on the first discourse, should now turn to the second.